be able to share with you the methodology, the data, the key findings, which we're all excited about, and specifically what's next with the report. Now, with inside the report, and Amanda won't go through this, but there's a dateline inside the report, which is kind of exciting. And we've been 20 years in the making, and that dateline takes you through from our start at the front end, 2004, to when you see all the populated by things that have happened to us over the years. Because if you think about that, I mean, 2009, we actually released our best practices report. That's how far ago it was. And we're still living through what the best practices look like. When we got into 2014, we launched the Supplier Diversity Playbook series. So actually, while we're working with people, we're still trying to make sure we put things in black and white so people can actually live through what's going on and can add value to, and that adds value to what they do. And then, of course, in 2022, we did the Supplier Diversity Report state of what it was like in Canada. But through all that time, we've been collecting and building on our corporate database. We've been collecting and building on our vast array of suppliers from coast to coast to coast. And we've been impacting and developing and building on the practices that make things better. So hopefully what you'll see as you live through this 20 years has been an accumulation of a lot of knowledge to a lot of people, and it enables you to see where we are now and what that means as we go forward in the beginning. What I'd like to do this afternoon is to introduce you to this incredible team who've worked with us. This does not come easy, and this is not something you can just pick up off the shelf. They've done some deliberate and deep dive work with our stakeholder groups. So whether they be corporate members, whether it be supplier, whether the CAMSC team, to be able to pull together what you're going to see this afternoon. I'd love to introduce you to, and you've heard already, Florence Amati. She's a leader over there. She is an incredible force. She brings a vast amount of knowledge to the table, and she's been incredible for us to work with. And then Amanda Lee, she's so eloquent. She will take you through one by one the key findings that they've been able to come up with. That, of course, we're excited about, because what does it mean for where we go forward? What does it mean for where we've been, and how do we use that going forward? So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Amanda, or Florence. You're going to start, and then I'm going to hand it off to Florence, who will lay the groundwork, and then hand it off to Amanda. So thank you for joining us, and sit back and be amazed. Thank you.
Cassandra, thank you for your very kind words. This was a true labor of love. We loved every minute of it. It was eye-opening in so many ways, which we'll talk about as we go forth. But I'll let Amanda get started on it, and then I'll continue from there. But thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Cassandra, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm Amanda, a project director at Laisar. So let's talk about why we thought this economic impact report was so important for CAMSC and why now, right? So to kind of give you an introduction to our work at Laisar, our work centers around impact communications and economic impact studies. So the goal is to be able to communicate how organizations are having a socioeconomic impact in the communities where they live, where they work, and where they serve. The way that we actually came to this work originally was through working with companies for supply chain inclusion. So we were doing strategy, tracking, and compliance when it came to supplier diversity. And eventually, over the years, we came to recognize the power of data to really tell a story of socioeconomic impact. And we started to conduct economic impact studies to really quantify how organizations are contributing to the economy. And we then communicate that in a way that humanizes the data and tells the story in a way that connects to the audience. So Laisar is a CAMSC certified supplier, and it was really an honor and a privilege for us to do this report for CAMSC because we believe in its mission and we've seen the impact that it's having through the 4 pillars of certify, connect, develop, and advocate to drive supplier diversity forward in Canada. And one of the ways that we were really able to witness that was through attending DeFi, the DeFi conference earlier this year. It's a joint conference representing diverse businesses hosted by SDAC, the Supplier Diversity Alliance Canada, of which CAMSC is a part. And we were able to talk to so many certified suppliers and corporate members who just came up and spoke to us so passionately about how much CAMSC has done for them and how they were really able to leverage the connections and the resources that they gained through CAMSC to achieve business success and establish a greater economic footprint for their businesses. So we had an inkling there that, okay, there's really a powerful story to be told here. We also knew that CAMSC was sitting on a lot of data from its certified suppliers. And so, if you're a supplier, you know that part of the certification process is collecting a lot of data about your business. And so we knew about the power of this data to tell a story of impact, and we wanted to take advantage of this. And lastly, we know about the importance of an organization like CAMSC that centers so much around advocacy to have tools and resources to be able to make the business case for driving supplier diversity forward and showing how its work really contributes to the Canadian economy and the global economy. And so I'm going to pass it to Florence to talk a little bit more about the development of the report.
Okay, good afternoon again. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank Cassandra and her entire team, which made this work really easy for us to do in terms of data collection, in terms of understanding the history and putting it all into perspective for us. Without that, this report could not have happened. And so thank you all for giving us this amazing opportunity to do this. And what I'd like to do is to share, as we share insights and our strategies on how this all came about. I know it'll start from, we do a lot of this type of work in the United States. Going to Canada for the first time was really an eye-opener. We came with a lot of the assumptions we had in the US. And very quickly, we understood that there were nuances between the US and Canada. And so that was definitely, so we had to put aside everything we knew about doing this kind of work and come in with a fresh, open mind in terms of, okay, we're in Canada now. We're going to spell labor with a U and think in terms of how Canadians think. So that's really how we had to get ourselves integrated into the Canada. So every once in a while, Amanda will start speaking with a Canadian accent. It's like, okay, that's right, we're there. So anyway, so how did we do this? We had to research the landscape. And one of the first things that we did notice was the key differences between the US market and the Canadian market is supply diversity in the US has a long history. It's been around for a long time. It came out of the civil rights movement. A lot of people recognize that there's diverse suppliers, there's economic inclusion programs in place, there are government mandates that happen, there are organizations that have put mandates in place, and there are a lot of companies that are certified throughout. There are a lot of organizations that certify companies as diverse, and these companies are the ones who pretty much get a lot of these contracts. And so there's a whole culture of that in the US. All this was relatively new in Canada and not as widespread. We very quickly noticed that in addition to having a lot of the same types of diverse suppliers in Canada, there were key groups and the language was different in Canada that we recognized. We recognized that Indigenous communities are very important and very much recognized with specific programs. We also recognize that there's a rich history of immigrants who have moved to Canada and been very successful. And so they're also a very big part of the equation. The terms are different. You hear the word visible minority. I'm actually hearing the word visible minority more now in the US, but you hear that a lot in Canada. We also heard, of course, Indigenous, and we also heard about refugees. Those are things that we never saw in the US, but which are also very recognized, and programs are being put in place for it. And so we had to look at the supply diversity landscape from that perspective. What was also important for us was to understand Canada as a whole. And so as we started to understand Canada, understand how this type of work is being done, the report started to shape up. We started to understand what CAMSC was doing vis-a-vis what was happening writ large. And we realized that CAMSC really is a leading force in Canada. And so, and that's why this report, we realized, was we were doing something that was really important work. And we knew we had to take it, give it all that we could give it, because it was, how did I put this? It was really the story of Canada and immigrants and Indigenous and refugees and the population as a whole in terms of how important this work is. And so we spoke to leaders. As Amanda mentioned, going to DeFi conference was actually a huge eye-opener, and that's really what set the direction of this report. With the passion with which we spoke to people, we had so many people introduced to us, and every conversation really confirmed that we were onto something special. That first of all, the relationship between the CAMSC organization and their suppliers and corporate members was like nothing I've ever seen before. There was a real collaboration, a real partnership. that happen. And that's where all the success comes from. We go through this report and you see the numbers, you'll really understand that this doesn't just happen. It takes proper, real leadership and real connections and real planning to make this type of work really make a difference. And so we spoke to, in addition to that, we did several surveys. We interviewed suppliers. We collected data, as Amanda mentioned. We looked at a lot of data. And so as we saw the data and started pour through, and it's like we're getting so many exciting insights in all the data that we're collecting that it really did, again, shape this report very much. The other key thing that we had to look at was the economic impact study. Now, we came from the US, and so we knew that we had to look at the data from a totally different lens. So how did we do that? First of all, I'm sorry, we recognized an organization in that there was Statistics Canada, StatCan. And StatCan was extremely helpful. We went to them, told them our dilemma, and they fed us so much information. They offered us direction. They looked at our data. They told us how the data could be interpreted. Once we understood how the calculation had to happen, we went back to them to help us validate the data, and they were extremely helpful with that. So shout out to StatCan for everything that they did to also make this report possible. And so with that information, we were able to come up with this report in terms of the really meaningful thing. It's great to have the stories, but also having the numbers and explaining the numbers, I think is also a key part and really shows the impact and the influence of CAMSC in the larger Canadian economy. And with that, so here are some numbers that we'll talk about again a little bit later. So impact at a glance, there are over 180 corporate members. CAMSC has over 600 certified suppliers, and actually with a database that has over 2,000 other suppliers in there who may or may not be certified. And then this is a number that I really love, the 400 annual buyer and supplier one-on-one meetings. Those are things that really make the organization tick. And when we spoke to corporate members and suppliers, that was the one thing that they brought up was the importance of that number in terms of the one-on-one meetings, in terms of how the CAMSC team would really go out of their way to really get to know their businesses and introduce them to corporate members and make connections happen. And so this is all what's reflected throughout the report. And when we looked in terms of the suppliers, again, that was a number that was staggering for us. The annual average revenue for all suppliers is about $10 billion a year. And that $10 billion ranges from anywhere from companies bringing in a few $100,000 to bring in millions, tens of millions of dollars. But that was, as a whole, that was $10 billion in annual revenue by certified suppliers. Now, we did look at data of all CAMSC members, but this report specifically focuses on companies that are headquartered in Canada. There are US-based companies like us who are doing business in Canada, but we wanted to make sure that we've really focused on the economic impact of Canadian companies in Canada. And so that's what's reflected in this particular number. Now, looking at it from the economic impact, this is where we worked with StatCan on that data. 24,000 jobs annually is what it comes to when you look at the $10 billion in revenue that is being made by these suppliers. What does that mean in terms of economic output? And we'll explain what that means a little bit later, but that's $12 billion annually. And when we look at this was over a three-year period. Actually, I'm jumping over myself. We'll talk about that later. But looking at it from an annual basis, it's $12 billion. And when we talk about labor income, that $3 billion represents the monies that these suppliers are paying to their employees. And so without having any context to it, we do recognize that these are all amazing, staggering numbers to talk about the impact of CAMSC suppliers to the Canadian economy. Okay.
Thank you, Florence. So what are the key insights that we can pull out of this report? The first major one is that CAMSC is sparking economic growth and having an economic impact on a local, national, and global scale by driving supplier diversity through its 4 pillars. We also know that Indigenous, visible minority, and refugee-owned businesses are contributing substantially to Canada's economy. And we see that reflected in the numbers that Florence just went through. We'll go more in depth on that later. We can also recognize that that data represents only a portion of diverse businesses in Canada, right? The ones that are currently CAMSC certified. So there's a potential for even more impact. The numbers that we're going through represent just a microcosm of what these diverse businesses are contributing to the Canadian economy, which is huge. We also know that diverse suppliers are driving further economic inclusion, they're creating jobs, and they're strengthening communities across Canada. And because of this, economic inclusion is a necessary part of fostering economic growth and success, especially as diversity in Canada only continues to grow. So all of these findings really validate the case for inclusive procurement policies in Canada. We see this report as a case study to really make the business case for economic inclusion and supplier diversity programs in Canada. And we'll see throughout this presentation how the evidence really unfolded to us as we were speaking to different stakeholders and analyzing the data.
So here's some information that we also got from StatCan that really helps put this whole report in perspective. 40% of Canadians will be a part of the racialized population by 2041. So keep that in mind as we talk about the importance of this report. 60% of Canadian companies believe engaging with diverse suppliers has a positive impact, but there are only 19% that have formal supply diversity programs in Canada. And I know CAMSC is doing a lot behind the scenes to change that narrative. And so with that, Amanda, take it away.
So let's delve deeper into the revenue earnings of these CAMSC certified suppliers over the past 3 years. And just to reiterate, these are the suppliers who are headquartered in Canada. And this data represents a little over 600 companies. So these 600 companies over the past 3 years, from 2021 to 2023, earned a whopping $31.2 billion in revenue. More than 70% of these suppliers earned an aggregated revenue over $1 million over the past 3 years. And so we can see here the industry breakdown of these revenue earnings and see that these suppliers spanned every industry from manufacturing to construction to finance to educational services. And it really gives a clear understanding of the economic scale that these businesses represent, right? Not only the revenue number, but the breadth of how they're spanning across the entire Canadian economy. And if we take a look at the geographic breakdown of that 3-year revenue, we do see that the revenue numbers were higher in more populated regions compared to the more sparsely populated regions. So the first province with the highest concentration of CAMSC certified suppliers and the highest total revenue number was Ontario, with almost $28 billion in total revenue. Then we see the second highest concentrated province for suppliers and revenue was British Columbia, with over $2 billion in revenue. And then all of the other provinces and territories earned a combined $1 billion in revenue. And so, we do see here that the revenue was concentrated in some regions, and yet CAMSC certified suppliers are located all across Canada, and they're earning revenue all across Canada, even in the regions that are more sparsely populated. We are also aware that CAMSC does have ongoing efforts to reach suppliers that are in those less populated areas, for instance, further out west. The organization is partnering with different other orgs to expand its reach, even starting committees to collaborate and build connections with suppliers in those areas and really help increase its visibility and impact in some of the more sparsely populated regions. So one of the major ways that CAMSC drives its economic impact is through that connect pillar, right? We know that when a diverse supplier becomes certified with CAMSC, it opens doors and it opens windows for them to gain access to new markets, to business opportunities, contracts, and partnerships to that that group of corporate members, over 180 corporate members, who are companies who intentionally want to diversify their supply base, right? That's why they're members with CAMSC. And so the suppliers have to show up and put in the work, right? It's not immediate magic once they become certified with CAMSC. But when they are active and really leveraging CAMSC services to benefit them, it's paid off in really astonishing ways. So just a couple examples here. We see Rain Zhang, founder of Willowist, who mentions how CAMSC's networking opportunities have allowed her to access larger corporate customers and bigger contracts. And then Isvar Prashad, president of the Carter Bennett Group, describes that CAMSC has been like his personal sales team and advocate to really make those direct connections to him, to corporate members, who some of which have become, some of his largest clients over the years. And continuing on the idea of gaining access to new markets, we know that CAMSC is driving impact not only on a local and a national scale, but also on a global scale. If we look here at the geographic markets that are served by CAMSC certified suppliers, we see many of them serve the provincial market and national market, and a large portion also serve an international market, 36%. And CAMSC has actually been instrumental in making those connections for some of its suppliers and allowing them to expand internationally. We see here New Malwa Express, Manny Mavi, describing how CAMSC was able to connect his company to large automotive companies in the US, including General Motors. And then Yemi Akindoju here for Vanity Fashions explained to us how CAMSC introduced him to the Can Export Program, the SME program, which finances his company's trade shows in the US. And Yemi has actually had 2 successful trade shows in the US so far, is, that much closer to really expanding his business throughout the US, thanks to the connection that CAMSC helped to make between him and this program. So we see here that CAMSC has not only been connecting suppliers to buyers at corporations, but also to resources and partners that can offer additional access and additional opportunities for business growth on a national and on a global scale. So let's talk about the economic ripple effect that CAMSC has been having. This is really what our economic impact study was about, is measuring the economic contribution that these CAMSC certified suppliers are having to the Canadian economy. And so the ripple effect comprises of 3 components. It's direct, indirect, and induced. And what that really is just describing how every dollar that's spent with these businesses continues to go to work through the economy and through communities across Canada. So if we look at direct impact, that's what the suppliers are generating directly through the value of their goods and services that they're providing to their clients. Then we look at indirect, which is what these businesses are spending with other businesses in their own supply chains. Every business, in order to operate, has to purchase goods and services from other businesses, and that's what's represented by indirect. And then induced is just that money being reinvested into communities by employees who are spending their wages. And so when we think about the total economic contribution, it's all of these 3 elements being combined to really describe that ripple effect. And so one major aspect of this economic contribution that we calculated using StatCan as a resource was the economic output of these suppliers. We see that over the past 3 years, CAMSC certified suppliers headquartered in Canada generated over $12 billion in output annually. And if we look at the most recent number for 2023, that is $19.2 billion in output. So what do we mean by output? The output is the total value of goods and services that these companies produced that were contributing to the broader Canadian economy. And we have to remember that this represents just 600 companies, many of them being small businesses. And these businesses contribute over $19.2 billion in just 1 year. And then looking at labor income. So labor income is all of the compensation paid to employees, including the employees working in production, in the supply chain, and then in the broader economy. So all of that is the economic benefit that's flowing to workers. They're then spending their dollars in the community and driving additional economic impact. So we're looking at over $3 billion annually generated in labor income by these suppliers over the past 3 years, culminating in a 2023 number of $5.6 billion in labor income being paid to employees. So if we continue to think about that economic ripple effect, one of the main things that really surprised us was how intentional many of the CAMSC certified suppliers are in continuing to drive further economic inclusion and impact in their own companies and in their own supply chains. So if we look at, for instance, Kathy Cheng here of Redwood Classics, her company has a commitment to their apparel being made in Canada. So there's local impact right there. And then she's driving additional economic inclusion and impact in her own supply chain, making sure that over half of the spend in her factory is spent with women-owned and minority-owned businesses. And then we look at New Malwa Express here, recording over 40% of their spend with suppliers who are CAMSC certified, and also championing an inclusive workforce in an industry, which is logistics and transportation, where that's not often the case. And so these suppliers are, taking the success that they've been able to find and really giving a hand to other folks who can also benefit from economic inclusion. We also see how CAMSC certified suppliers have been driving job creation in Canada. So one of the calculations we were able to do was how many jobs is that $10 billion of annual revenue supporting in the Canadian economy. And we're looking at 24,000 jobs supported annually, meaning that if all of these, 600 suppliers were to not be operating tomorrow, we'd be losing 24,000 jobs annually. And once again, we see how CAMSC certified suppliers are very intentional about this job creation. Plato here is creating careers in technology for members of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities across Canada. They have a train and employ model, and they've trained close to 400 Indigenous peoples over the past 8 years in Canada. And then looking at Greenie, Purush here is aware that many refugees and immigrants, when they arrive in Canada, they have a hard time getting work. They sometimes have language barriers. And so he hires and trains refugee women to work as independent contractors in his factory. And so we see, that jobs number, what that really looks like in action. And then continuing to think about that economic ripple effect and how every dollar is going to also strengthen communities in Canada. We see a couple examples here. Nicole Matos of Rivet Construction. So Nicole is actually a great case study also on that develop pillar that CAMSC has. So she was able to take courses and receive mentorship from a variety of CAMSC corporate members, was able to connect with corporates such as Ellis Dawn and CBRE, and has really been able to grow her business with CAMSC support. And with that success, what has she done? So she's hired Indigenous and diverse employees. She's leased her extra office space to diverse small business owners, one of which has even grown out of the space and become fairly large and successful. And she's then pulled them in on contracts when she could. And then, one of her other offices has now become a co-working space occupied by diverse female entrepreneurs. So we see here really this belief in a diverse business ecosystem, right? Where it's not just about, your one business benefiting. When we look at economic inclusion, it's really about a network and how that dollar continues to go to work on a local and national scale. And then looking here at Kapitiak, an Inuit-owned coffee company that's actually a social enterprise, and 75% of their profits are used to support and preserve Inuit culture, language, and knowledge. And so once again, we see here how these diverse businesses are really strengthening their own communities with the success that they're having. Delving a little deeper into that connect pillar, we also see how CAMSC corporate members are leveraging those connect services and how they're benefiting. So one of the outcomes of our survey was seeing that 93% of CAMSC corporate members use the supplier database and the sourcing list. 63% use the matchmaking and networking services, and 28% are participating in event sponsorship, which allows them to also act as advocates in a sense, right? A couple examples here, we see the City of Toronto, which has used CAMSC and its supplier database to really help build up its social procurement program and use it as a pipeline for identifying diverse suppliers. One of which I encourage everyone to read the report if you haven't yet, to go into more detail. But one of those companies that's CAMSC certified that I connected with was Tam Surveying Limited, a land surveying company. And the City of Toronto's spend with that company has only increased and increased over time as the city has become more familiar with their quality of work. And then looking at CBRE, which has actually featured CAMSC certified suppliers in their own internal supplier search tool. So we see CAMSC really becoming a pivotal resource that's a part of these corporate member supplier diversity programs. And one of the companies that CBRE connected with through CAMSC was Rivet Construction that I just talked about. And Nicole Matos actually was selected as CBRE's National Supplier Diversity Award recipient in 2021. So we see, these long-term mutually beneficial relationships being built through that CAMSC connection. And then also looking at the develop pillar and how CAMSC corporate members are taking advantage of that. So the supplier diversity playbook, it gives corporate members a set of training tracks to support them in advancing their supplier diversity initiatives. We also see corporate members participating in the corporate member forums and peer learning and member advisory services. So companies like Stellantis and BGIS have used the supplier diversity playbook to help develop their own programs, so much so that they can now act as a resource to other peer organizations who also participate in the training and share their own insights and best practices when it comes to developing a successful supplier diversity program. Looking here at a case study, delving deeper into Stellantis, we can really see how being a CAMSC corporate member allows a company to further advance economic equity through CAMSC's 4 pillars. So let's start off with certify. So Josh Hernandez of the Security Guard Group, seen at the bottom there, a CAMSC certified company that really believes in the credibility of the CAMSC certification being pivotal to help them make connections and move their business forward. And one of those connections that was made was with Stellantis. So Stellantis partnered with CAMSC to host an inclusive supplier event for a new battery plant that they're building. And so that event is the one you see pictured here. So more than 400 diverse suppliers showed up to this event, and one of them was Security Guard Group. So because of this event and the connections that were made, Security Guard Group won a successful contract as Stellantis's primary security supplier. So we see there the connect pillar in action. And Stellantis actually spends more than $2 billion annually with CAMSC certified Indigenous and minority suppliers. So we really see here a dedication to having an inclusive supply chain by a major corporation. Looking at the develop pillar, Stellantis, as I mentioned before, has participated in the supplier diversity playbook training and now is supporting the training of other companies who want to develop their programs. And then the advocate pillar. So Stellantis has been speaking at CAMSC procurement fair events, participating in the corporate member forums, and has really established itself as an industry leader, sharing best practices and really carrying the work of CAMSC forward when it comes to explaining the case for a supplier diversity program. So speaking of the advocacy pillar, we know this is one of CAMSC's main goals in the work that it does, is advocating for inclusive supply chains. And one of the mechanisms through which it does this is through more than 20 strategic partners that it's connected with across the globe who share its same mission of advancing economic inclusion. We also know that CAMSC has been engaging all levels of the Canadian government to help shape inclusive procurement policies and really ensure that those policies reflect the growing diversity of the Canadian population. One of these ways that it's doing that is by being a member of the Supplier Advisory Committee, which helps to bring improvements to government procurement and improve the relationship between the Canadian government and suppliers. And then we also see CAMSC advocating by communicating the business case and the economic and social benefits of supplier diversity. And one of the outcomes of it doing that is actually being able to turn other companies into advocates and agents of change. So we see here Nadine Shaw of CBRE, who's also the chair of CAMSC's corporate committee, really talking about how she tries to really spread the word of CAMSC and the power that the certification holds. And then for other corporations to really explain to them how an inclusive supply chain can benefit them and benefit communities. And so, CAMSC is able to really help and give other organizations the tools to share their own successes and then become champions of supplier diversity themselves. And so thinking about this report and once again, the purpose and the impact that it has itself, we believe that this report is a resource for CAMSC to really continue its advocacy work and show the business case for economic inclusion. And we also encourage all of you who are here in attendance to use it as a resource for yourselves. So, for your own advocacy, whether you're a diverse supplier, whether you're a corporate member or someone who's, just passionate about economic inclusion, this report is here for you to use as a resource and share widely for your own advocacy about why economic inclusion is so crucial in Canada and necessary for building a strong Canadian economy. So, thank you. And with that, I see we might have had some folks send in questions.
We are receiving some questions, but I was wondering if you wanted to go over some questions that we discussed earlier, perhaps, with Cassandra, Amanda, Florence. What are some of the key insights that amongst all of them that we discussed that really stood out? And folks, you're welcome to leave your questions in the Q&A as we'll be going over them in detail.
Bushra, if I can ask you to take the slide deck down, so then we can have spotlights on the ladies. And I think when we talked the other day, so first of all, Amanda, Lawrence, thank you so much. It's when we delivered this on the table at the awards gala, it looked like this big bundle of, oh my God, let me get around to it. But when you break it on the key highlights that you shared, it becomes, oh my God, I should have spent some time, because there's some key nuggets in there that are really, really important. And so for those those listening this afternoon, one of the things Florence started out with was, what's the difference between Canada and US? And so I think we wanted to cover that because this economic input's being done globally, but it has a difference whatever region you're in. And so I want to make sure that you're very clear that enough work was done at the front end between Florence and her team and the Canadian Statistic or Stats Canada to make sure it's truly representing the Canadian economy. And so that was one of the key aspects we wanted to share. The other one, and I'll say to Florence, what surprised you? What surprised you in doing this work with the stakeholders?
Oh, there's so much that surprised us. First of all, I think your relationship with your suppliers, your members, your corporate members and your supplier members. I think the synergies that exist is the passion that the leadership that you have that carries across the organization and the things that happen because of it, I think was really big for us. And I think I walked up to you at DFI and I was like, oh my God, I can write, we can do this report because it was what we heard. Everything in this report was exactly the way we received it. So all we had to do was put it down on paper. And then really understanding that the mindset of supply diversity, what supply diversity looks like in the US is very different than in Canada. When seeing the whole, even the land acknowledgement, I think that's such a beautiful way to start your meetings and start every conversation. And I think that's an important part of the process, acknowledgement that we don't see here in the US. And so for me, that was such a beautiful reminder of where it all started. And then to see how the immigrant population, who have become such an integral part of Canada, are also very much a part of this process. And so looking in Canada, I think, I know, this could be a controversial, let me be careful how I put this, but I really do.
I love it. I love it already. I don't even know what you're going to say. I love it already. Okay.
No, it was just the way the different groups all come together and work together. And we saw that in terms of the business relationships as well. There was a lot of companies working with companies with other members. And I think that really spoke to the reason why this is important. And I continue to say this is such a great case study because the work that's being done, the introductions that are being made shows what's possible. And this is not, it's very clear for me is that when people look at this, they cannot say that your help, it's a handout because this is actual contributions to the Canadian economy. And so it's very clear for anyone. I mean, I think it's a case study for the US actually, is to say that this is what happens to your entire economy when you open yourself up and you give people an opportunity. And those people, a lot of the stories we heard, people came from very little and they were able to come with a dream. And with that dream, they built up these organizations. And then they're making a huge contribution to the community at large, to Canada as a whole, and the reputation of Canada across the globe. And so just to be so close to the stories and you meet people, and I don't want to mention any names, but there are people where you heard their very humble stories, and when you heard what they had been able to do with it, that's how you get to that $10 billion. That's how you get to that $19 billion of economic output. And I know now that we're all recovering from COVID, that number is just going to continue to grow. And so those were the things that really made this report very special for us, is those personal stories, is to understand the important how supply diversity is looked at in Canada, which actually brings a lot of people to the table very easily and I know there's a lot of room for growth. And I think that's the excitement of where you are now, is that the word's getting out. I think hopefully this report will help people really understand that more of this is needed because what you're doing is working. And it's helping everyone, and it's helping create jobs, and it's helping grow economies, it's helping families, it's creating generational wealth. And so those are things that surprised us and also made this really a great project to work on.
Excellent. Now, Bushra, I'm going to stop right there because I see we have some questions. So do you want to rate them? Do you want me to rate them?
Yes, you can go ahead, please. Yes.
Okay. And I advocate if you have any other questions, please put them down. So from Peter, Otis Saskatoon, Peter says, I create investor and FI ready business plans and a live plan expert advisor and also a co-founder at a fintech firm. How do I take advantage of my certification? I believe it's a roadmap, but what should my roadmap to success leveraging CAMSC? That's a question for my team, not necessarily a question for Harriet, because I love that question. And that's a question I want you to come back to my team and have that's very personalized, have that information, have that discussion. I want you to, otherwise, I want you to use the roadmap to look at, to say there are opportunities, that if someone talks to the benefits of why am I diversifying my supply chain? Why does it make sense? This is why it makes sense, because it grows everybody. I want you to use it from that perspective, but for your own personal discussion, please connect with the team. We'd love to have that conversation. Next question from Naji. What do you see the challenges going forward for diversified businesses in navigating the labor market in the current economic climate and the new government rules for temporary foreign workers? Well, that's a really big question. Okay, let me break it down again. And Florence, just jump in if you see. What do you see the challenges going forward for diversified businesses in navigating the labor market in the current economic climate? I'm going to stop it there. Because the new rules for the temporary foreign workers, that becomes very specific to what that looks like. But let's talk about, are there challenges? You do this economic impact report across from, US to Canada. What are the challenges for diversified businesses in navigating the labor market?
I'd like to look at it from a different lens. There are
Okay.
always going to be challenges, and it's because of the challenges that we have a CAMPC. Because that's your support system to navigate those challenges because the business case has been made and the relationships are there to help you overcome those. And so I think engaging more actively, I think Isvar said this when we met with him, you've got to show up.
Yeah.
And when you show up and you're active and you're a member and you understand that, as much as you give, you're going to get a whole lot more. I think that's why you need a CAMC. The challenges are always going to be there, no matter what the regulations are, but people succeed within those. And I think aligning with CAMC and its members, its employees, and understanding who the corporations are the things that are going to help ultimately everyone grow.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And I apologize, Najee, because when we talk about the temporary foreign workers, I think that's a whole different discussion, getting a handle on where the Canadian government's going right now as it relates to temporary foreign workers. So that's a bigger discussion. Next question. Does the report showcase the impact and opportunities for rural suppliers? Do you have an rural breakdown on what you do, or is it overarching?
Amanda, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I think that would be a great opportunity for additional analysis. I think what we have done so far is showing the geographic breakdown of which provinces and territories these suppliers are located in, but we could drill even deeper as far as what those areas look like, as far as which ones are more urban and which ones are more rural. We do know in our conversations with CAMSC certified suppliers that there is, more of a challenge in some of the rural areas, and also that CAMSC is putting in the work to increase its visibility and connect more with these suppliers. So, for instance, looking at Nicole Matos for Rivet Construction, which is located in Alberta. She is actually joining a CAMSC committee where she's going to be helping build connections for Indigenous suppliers in those areas where, because of not necessarily being as populated, maybe corporate members not being located there, right? Many of them are headquartered in Ontario, in Toronto. So CAMSC, really is doing the work to increase its visibility and increase accessibility for business opportunities for the businesses that are located in the more rural areas. So we only see potential for more impact when it comes to that. But many of the suppliers that we spoke with were located in more rural regions.
No, thank you for that, because I think that rural urban breakdown is vital. But even when you develop your plan, your business plan, or what you're going to do, you take into perspective where you are and how you're going to meet your market. Does your market come to you, or do you go to meet the market? So that's a whole different discussion. But I like the fact that you said that there might be an opportunity to look at does it tell us anything when we break it down to those lines? Do we have enough of that? What does it say to us?
Right.
Okay, I see we have a few more minutes left. I'm going to ask if there's any other questions or comments.
We do have a few raised hands as well. So
Okay, now I don't know how to do that, so you'll have to do that.
no, I'll help you there. So Rain, I am allowing you to ask your question if you want to. Yeah, I just asked you. Yeah, Rain, we should be able to hear you now. You can ask your
Okay.
questions or
Okay,
comments.
thank you. Actually, it's I don't have a question, but I think it's a wonderful study. It's actually lots of great insights, not only just for the area our company is working on, but it's just open,
Yes.
very very in depth, but also very focused, very wide range. What I want to see that as a supplier, this is my experience, especially after I joined CAMSC. I know every owner has that anxiety. I do have to about how to scale up. But I want to emphasize that as an owner of the business, we have we have responsibility to demonstrate the business value of diversity. What we bring to the table, a diversity not only because our color is different. Diversity means what different you can bring and what you can positive impact to the economic, and how we can showcase, and what are our metrics, and how we align the value with the value proposition with the customer. I mean the corporate expectation, and how we build the trust, and how we do the operation excellence. This is something I think we need as a you have to think about put our feet in the corporate shoes.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, maybe it sounds I'm
No, I'm just going to jump in light of time to say you've hit the nail on the head by saying we all have a role to play in this. It's important that everyone plays a role, and as a diverse business owner, you have as much of a role to play as a corporate has a role to play in driving this forward. So thank you for making that case, because I think that's what's really important, that we all know we play a role in this. And if we had diverse suppliers doing their own supplier diversity program, the numbers would look slightly different as well, because we'd be using that data inside what the ladies have collected to date. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's that. Yeah. You get the point. Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. Okay. Bushra, anybody else before we wind down?
We do have another question. Vu, I believe we've already answered your question, but do you have another question for our panelists today? You are able to speak.
Yes.
Yes, please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. Sorry. It is a great session today and a lot of information to dig in, but I understand your mission. So, like, I'm a business owner, small business owner myself, a minority, also a person with disability. I'm a quadriplegic. It kind of changed my life, 20 years ago when I was disabled in a car accident. So took me a while to get back into my life and do business again, right? And I'm starting a software company. We specialize in custom point of sales, specifically catered to senior living. We do meal plan tracking, nutritional tracking, and we're looking to scale. The company's been around for 25 years, but I purchased the company from the owner last year, so I can scale it. It is a very specialized niche market. The opportunity is great there.
Bill, I'm going to jump in. We're down to 4 minutes left on our call.
So
I don't want to get your question
sorry.
in. Okay.
Yeah, my question is, do you have any kind of support for people with disabilities if they wanted to start a business or gain employment, right? It's more specifically not for me, but for other owners out there, right?
Yeah, I believe we've answered your Vu's question, in the chat. So we have various partners that can provide these supports, and we can explore these further during a one-on-one through supplier support.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you. Sorry for repeating the question.
No, thank you so much, Vu. Thank you. But I recognize everyone's down. We're 1:57. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who's participated. It's been incredible. And thank you for allowing us to find some time in your day for what we see are really important findings that says supplier diversity is making a difference in the Canadian economy, and can make even a bigger difference the more we contribute, the more we jump in and become part of what's going on. This is not the last you'll see these ladies. As you can tell, when there's talented people around, we do not let them escape our domain at all. So you'll see these ladies again. I also want to let you know there's access, I believe, if not on our website, access to this report will be made available. So if you need to use it in any of your discussions with your members, with your team, that you can utilize this. If this is out there for you to take advantage of it, how to become part of your business case when you're talking to others. So please think about that. And I just want to end by saying, we're at the end of October, but we're planning already for next year. So mark your calendars, April 15th and 16th. In Toronto, CAMSC will be running their procurement fair. You've heard wonderful things about Defy. Defy is a 2-year, it's a biannual event you'll see. So you'll see the combined conference again 2 years out, 2026. But next year, you'll see the CAMSC Procurement Fair, April 15th, 16th, downtown Toronto. So other than that, thank you very much. Bushra, anything to add before we close off?
I think we are just thankful to the Laisar team and to you, Cassandra, and to everyone who's joined us for joining us today. It has been certainly very insightful, and to have you here with us in this webinar. Folks, please don't forget to fill out our short post-event survey, the link for which I've posted in the chat. For all the folks who posted questions that we could not answer, please do not worry. We will have them answered through email or one-on-one later. Have yourselves a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, and we shall see you soon.
Thank
Take
you all.
care all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.